You're listening to the North Parkway Podcast, weekly talks designed to help you take the next step in your spiritual journey. You can learn more about our church at northparkway.org. And if these talks are helpful to you, consider using the link in the description to give. Your financial support helps us continue to make great content. All right, well, that's enough intro. Let's get to today's talk. How many recognize this guy? Actually, that's not me. I know it looks exactly like my physique. For our podcast folks at home, this is Michael Phelps. He is, in my estimation, the most famous of all Olympic athletes in the modern era. He is the most decorated of all Olympians in the modern era. This guy has 28 gold medals. He has so many gold medals, he probably needs to do like neck workouts to be able to hold all of that weight around his neck. This guy is a legend. He's a living legend. How many of you guys remember watching him compete in the Olympics? How many? Man, those were good times. I remember several weeks ago, we were watching this year's Olympics, and I was telling my kids, yeah, this was fun, but you should have seen Michael Phelps. Man, back in the day, if you're old enough to remember 2008, I know, I have to say that now, okay? We're all getting older. 2008, this guy competed in 8 different events, and he won gold in all 8 events. What a legend. The problem with this and having this in my memory is that when I watch today's Olympics, it's great, but it's not like when Michael Phelps was swimming. Right? How are you supposed to follow that up? It's like the 85 Bears. How are you supposed to do that again? Sorry, right? I live in the past too. I'm a Cowboys fan. All right? Sometimes the past highlight, I still have like a 1995 edition Super Bowl champions hat. That's the newest one they make for the Cowboys. Sometimes yesterday's highlights shine so brightly, they sort of overshadow today's wins. And it makes it difficult to enjoy the good that's going on in your life today. So as we continue to talk about being 100 years old as a church, and we celebrate all of the good times that we've had together, I want to talk for a little bit today about how to protect your heart and not allow the great times in your past and the great times in our church's past to steal all of the joy out of the good stuff that God wants to do moving forward. We're going to have some Bible verses up on the screens. They'll also be in the Bible app if you've got that. I'm just going to leave Mike right there so he can just inspire us. Cool guy. I want to talk to you about a guy who had big shoes to fill. A guy who had to lead some people who all had memory of some pretty awesome events. His name was Joshua, and he had the difficult task of following up Moses. All right? Jesus is the most popular guy in the Bible, but after Jesus, probably number 2, at least in Joshua's time, was Moses. And Moses was an awesome guy, but he couldn't live forever. So Joshua chapter 1, verse 1 starts this way. And as we read this today, I want you to try to put yourself into Joshua's shoes and imagine what he's feeling like when God says this. Okay, Joshua 1, verse 1. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you to lead these people. Okay? And if I'm Moses, I'm what, me? Wait a minute. I'm in charge now? All right? Everybody, it's fun to be in charge. And I've told my kids this. It's fun to be in charge until you're actually in charge, and then you realize all of the stress that comes with having to be the one to ultimately make the decision. If you've ever been in charge of something, or you've ever been on the team, and then you get promoted to being in charge of the team, you realize, oh, now I know why that guy has so much gray hair. It's stressful. Imagine you're Joshua, and God comes and he says, okay, Moses is dead, now it's you, man. Because, right, everyone knew Moses was getting old. Just so you understand, when Moses died, Moses went up on the mountain so God could say, here's the promised land. You don't get to go in it, but I at least want you to see it. He goes off to the mountain. He never comes back. Everyone's like, okay, I guess Moses is gone, right? He knew the time was coming soon, but Joshua now has this stress. I have to lead these people. I'm in charge of these people. And Moses is a tough act to follow. Just imagine, think about this. Do you know who the captain of the American swim team was, the Olympics, after he retired? Of course you don't, right? I don't know either. Why? Because he's not Michael Phelps. We're still thinking about Mike. If you're Joshua, here's what you're up against, okay? You have to lead these people, and they all remember, oh, Moses is the guy that went and stood face to face with Pharaoh and said, let my people go or else. And all of these plagues happened to Pharaoh that people are talking about thousands of years later. That was Moses. Did you realize this? Moses was the first person on earth that God revealed his name to. God said, go tell these people I said this. And Moses said, who should I say is sending me? And he said, tell them I am. Or as that sounds in Hebrew, Yahweh. Okay? Moses is the first one that said, this is what God's name is. Moses is the one who led them through the wilderness. Moses is the one who holds up his staff and the Red Sea parts and they walk across on dry land. Moses is the guy that goes up onto the mountain and is talking with God and comes back down with the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. All of those things were Moses. Okay? Absolute legend. If they gave gold medals for doing miracles, he would have a whole neck full. How many miracles does Joshua have under his belt? 0. And if I'm Josh, I'm thinking about this. Because I've witnessed all of these things too. If I'm Joshua, I'm thinking, man, how many times did the people want to leave Moses and go back to Egypt? How many times did the people get so frustrated with Moses they wanted to kill him? And he did all the miracles. I haven't done any of this stuff. How am I supposed to lead these people without all of the past behind me? But he had to lead because God was pushing people forward. We're going to skip one ahead to the rest of Joshua chapter 1, verse 2. God says, the time has come, Joshua, for you to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River and into the land I'm giving them. Now, if you just want to ramp up the difficulty level, right? Some of you guys who beat the game and then play it again on hard mode just because you enjoy pain, okay? If you want hard mode, you're in charge of leading, and we're going to do something that even Moses couldn't do, that even Moses didn't get. You got to do something that we've never done, to boldly go where man has not gone before, right? You got to do brand new stuff and take them into the promised land. And Joshua is understandably concerned. So God gives him this pep talk. And now we'll go back, Trent, one slide. And God says this, and this is important. When he gives Joshua this great command, go forward, he says this in verse 5. He says, no one will be able to stand against you as long as you live, for I will be with you as I was with Moses. Now that's an interesting statement because that could be taken a couple of different ways. I will be with you as I was with Moses. This as I was is kind of a stretchy concept. What does that mean? Does that mean that I'm going to carry the same staff that Moses carried? Does this mean that you're going to meet with me on the same time schedule? Does this mean I'm going to do the same miracles? Does this mean I'm going to grow the same beard? In what way am I going to be like Moses? You need some encouragement if you have that kind of task. And Joshua was the man for the job because Joshua was a bold guy. Real quick, years ago, when they got to the border of the promised land, when Moses was younger, he sent 12 spies to go out and investigate the land. Some of you guys know this story. So 12 of these guys go out, and out of 12 of them, 10 of them said, dude, we're dead. These guys are giants. They're going to smash us into paste. It's like Shrek the Ogre. We can't go in there. And there were only two guys that had the boldness to say, if God's with us, we can do anything. And Joshua was one of those two guys. Joshua's got courage, but these are big shoes to fill. So God says, I want you to go do something new. I want you to go where someone has not gone before because I'm still moving forward. And there's something important to learn from this story. The first thing to learn, and write this down in your notes, or you can fill this in on the Bible app. God has new mountaintops for every generation. God's mission to save humanity is moving forward through time. And you and I are part of this grand mission. We each have a role to play. We may not be leading the whole nation of Israel, but every one of us, the Holy Spirit has tapped us on the shoulder and said, you're part of this deal, and we're moving forward. We're going new places. We're doing something that hasn't been done before. And Moses took them so far, and God said, okay, now Joshua, same plan. We're still moving forward. God has new mountaintops for every generation. And Joshua, did I say Joseph? I get those mixed up. Joshua has stuff that he needs to do. So chapter 3, verse 8, God comes and he gives him some more detailed instructions. He said, give this command to the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant. That's this big golden box that they kept the 10 Commandments in. It represented God's physical presence on the earth. He said, tell the priests who are carrying this ark, when you reach the banks of the Jordan River, which is the border between them and the promised land, take a few steps into the river and stop there. Okay, if I'm Joshua, I'm a little concerned. Here's why. This is not the first time that God has told people cross a body of water. Many of you guys know how to swim. I think it's so cool that Pekin High School has a class just for swimming. You got to understand, some of you don't think it's cool, all right? Old guys like me that don't want people to drown. But understand, the nation of Israel, these guys, at this point, most of them had been living their entire lives in the wilderness with no bodies of water. None of them knew how to swim. And if the promised land is on the other side of a body of water, they're going to need a miracle because they're all going to drown, them and all of their stuff. And the last time, okay, because God said, if I'm Joshua, God said to me, as I was with Moses, I'm going to be with you. And so I'm counting on that in my mind. And then he says, okay, here's what we're going to do. You need to cross a body of water, kind of like the Red Sea. If I'm Joshua, I remember really well how the Red Sea crossing went. Moses takes the staff, he holds it up, God does this miracle, the music plays, and there's this like wall of water, it's dry land, and everyone just walks through. But now God is telling me to cross a body of water, and he changed the plan. He says nothing about the staff. He says, just tell the priest to go walk into the water. Okay? If I'm supposed to walk across on dry land and God says, walk into the water, does any of that sound weird to you? What are you doing? Why don't we just hold up the staff and it gets dry and then we'll walk across? I don't like muddy feet. It's like when you go to the theme park and you get wet socks. It's the worst, man. It's the worst. You're walking around all day. I don't want that miracle. God tells Joshua to do it differently, and there's something we can learn from this as well. Last week, don't put that up quite yet. Last week, we said that from your good old days, those experiences, they make great ingredients for good new days. And they do. But there's a danger here. Put this up on the screen. Write this down in your notes. Experiences make great ingredients, but terrible blueprints. Because God had not told them to cross the Jordan River yet. Different river. New mountain. New methods. And if you got caught up when God said to Joshua, if you're Josh and he says, as I was with Moses, I'm with you. If you took that to mean, I'm going to do exactly the same way for you as I did for Moses, you're in trouble. Because it's a new challenge. And God has new strategies for new challenges. Makes terrible blueprints. This is true for churches. This is true for businesses. Any of you guys ever work for a business and you realize these guys are stuck in 2012 It's been a while since then. If we don't update our business strategies, we're going to go out of business. This is true for your family. This is true for you as an individual. Your experiences, they make great ingredients for new good days. They make terrible blueprints because the world keeps moving forward and God's mission is moving forward as well. So Joshua has to do it in a new way, but he's a bold man. So the Bible records this in verse 9. So Joshua told the Israelites, "Today you will know that the living God is among you. Look, the Ark of the Covenant, which belongs to the Lord of the whole earth, will lead you across the Jordan River." And as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water, imagine the faith that's required. Think about this. Last time, God parted the water first, and then they walked across dry. This time, they see no evidence of anything changing. You're splashing into the water. But the Bible records that as soon as the feet of the priests touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up at a great distance, and all of the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. Different strategy, same result. God's taking care of people and helping them to move forward. New mountains, new methods. That's how forward works. And so they listen and they win. And it's important that this thing is moving forward. It's important to understand that when God said to Joshua, "I'll be with you as I was with Moses," that wasn't a statement about how. It was a statement about who. It was a statement about God still being with him. And he never said, "I want to recreate the good old days with you." It was always about good new days. See, there's a danger in hanging on to the good old days. And that's this, write this down in your notes. The only way to relive the past is to go backward. Because the past is back there. If you are Joshua and you said, "Man, I need to get some miracles under my belt before I try to lead these people because I'm not up to the task like Moses," and you said, "All right, here's the deal. Pack up the goats. We're going back to the Red Sea and we're going to part it again, baby." Right? Then they're all stoning this guy because he's an idiot. The only way to relive the past is to go backward. But God's plan is moving forward. And there's a problem here. If you're Joshua, you know this. That Moses' generation, and at this point, there are not many. The Bible records most of the old folks had died by this point. There were not many, but there were a few who remembered, and they were there when Moses parted the Red Sea through God's power and they walked across, okay? Moses' generation, they felt God when that miracle happened. They felt God when Moses comes down from the mountain and there's lightning going on and he's got the tablets. That generation had their God experience, and that's what it looked like, and that's what it felt like. And that's what they told to their kids. And I had a great Olympic moment when I watched this guy win 8 gold medals in the same. Unbelievable. But the Olympics continue. There are new moments, and this guy is retired, but there's still games, there's still competitions, there's still people winning medals. And different generations have different God moments. See, Joshua's generation, they felt God when the Jordan River parted and they walked across. Gideon's generation felt God when a farmer who was hiding doing his work became this bold army general. Samson's generation felt God when a buff guy ripped the city gates off and carried them away. David's generation felt God when a teenager stood up to a professional warrior and said, "I don't care how big you are, God can kill you." And every generation had this God experience, but they were all different. The only way to experience the past or relive the past is to go back, but God's plan is moving forward, and he has new experiences for every generation. And there's a danger of looking so much in the past and saying, "Boy, weren't those the days." Watch how this happens. How many of you would say this? there were some good old days in my past, and I didn't know they were the good old days when I was in them. Anybody else? If I had only known that video games were going to peak in 1996 with the N64, right? If I had only known that music was going to peak here, if I had only known, man, the good old days when we could just ride our bicycle down to the shop with $1 in our pocket, we can get an ice cream and all of this. Okay? Yeah, I didn't know they were the good old days when I was living them. It's so easy to be in the good old days and not realize it. And write this down in your notes and think about this. If you fall in love with the past, you will fail to live in the present. You'll be here. You'll be alive. But if you fall in love with the past, if you fall in love with the good old days, if you fall in love with the way things used to be, then there's this danger where you're now not soaking in the good from the present, and you could be in the middle of good new days and not even realize it. Because they look different. Because they're not good like the past. I'm an Olympics fan, and I know some of you guys maybe haven't watched those. But I enjoyed watching this guy, Noah Lyles. Noah's a sprinter. He ran the third fastest 100-meter dash ever. Oh, there we go, right? You guys just saw the back of it, huh? I'll just do this number. Okay. Third fastest ever. It was amazing. It was so fun to watch because it was one of the closest finishes ever. It was a true photo finish. It's like the end of the beginning of Cars, the movie, where, they back it up. Who won? Okay. That was fun. Okay. I enjoyed watching this girl, Tori Husk. Tori's an amazing swimmer. She got 5 Olympic medals. 3 of them were golds. They were a lot of fun to watch. I enjoyed watching this girl, Simone Biles. All right? The one in all the commercials. As it turns out, she's really good at gymnastics. They're watching this tumbling thing, and they're like, she's 12 feet off the ground. I'm like, how is that humanly possible when you're under 5 feet tall? Amazing. And I'm watching this with my kids. Now imagine if I'm watching this guy, and the kids are excited. Yay, Noah Lyles. And I say, it's not as good as Michael Phelps. What 1 gold medal? Are you kidding me? This guy has 28. Sorry, Noah. Okay? I'm watching Simone Biles with my girls, and they're like, I want to do gymnastics like her. I'm like, amateur. Michael Phelps. Right? That would stink. What a jerk I would be if I stole the joy out of a good moment because I said, but it's not as good as the really good moment. But how often do we do that with our good old days? Nostalgia is important in our lives. It's not a bad thing by itself, but it can wound us if we grow too attached to it. Did you know the word nostalgia, the word that humans use to tie this into this emotion, this comes from the Greek words nostos and algos. Nostos means to return, and algos means pain and suffering. And part of this nostalgia is the sadness that it's out there, but I can never get back to it. You want to know a little snippet of science? Scientists have looked at the way that we view the past, and what they've learned is that when we are nostalgic about the good old days, we remember an idealized version of the good old days. Okay, when you were thinking about, because, we all have different good old days. Natasha and I have talked before. If instead of vacationing to the Caribbean, I could just vacation 1 week to like the first week of college before I had any classes, when it's just me hanging out with my friends, good old days right there. I want to go back there. We all remember the good parts of the good old days, and we tend to sort of forget about the challenges that those days had. If we didn't, women would never have second children. You don't have 7 kids if you're thinking about all of the pain and suffering. You remember the good old, those days when you could just hold her like this? You mean when she's puking on your arm and you wear that? Okay. We all remember an idealized version of the good old days. Let me tell you something. Your actual good old days could not live up to your memory of the good old days. Think about this. 2008, this guy won 8 medals. You probably forgot this. 2008 was hosted by China, and it was the first time in recent memory the United States got blown out the total gold count. China beat us bad. It was an embarrassing loss as a nation. Oh, but he won 8 golds. Even that wasn't perfect. And if you say the good old days are what I need, that's when things were great. And it poisons the good that God has in today. See, there's value in the past, but not in trying to go back there, not in wishing that today could be like that. God references the past, even when he's talking to Joshua, but he does it with a different purpose. You see, write this down in your notes. Experiences make terrible blueprints, but they make great motivators. And the experiences of your past can be great motivators for your future if you let them teach you the right lesson. And here's that lesson. Joshua chapter 1, verse 5 and 6. God says to Joshua, "As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. So be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them." God uses the past and he says, I've been with Moses, and Joshua, you were there for it. You know what that was like. And he says, if I was with him and that's how he did everything, I'm with you, and that's how you will be successful. It's not because of the details. It's not because of the strategy. It's because God is with him in the moment that he needs it. And that means you don't have to go back to the old place to get that experience. The good old days, write this down in your notes, the good old days establish God's character and consistency. The good days in your life don't teach you this is how you have to do. If you were here earlier in the summer, we talked about the prophet Elisha and how he went all the way back to the mountain where God met with Moses, because this is what I need to do to talk to God. But you don't. The purpose of looking at the past, did you know when God brought the nation across the Jordan River, he said, now I want you to grab huge stones from the riverbank and pile them up and make a monument so that everyone will remember what happened. And so that years later, when you're walking by with your kids, they'll say, what's that pile of stones, Granddad? And you'll say, oh, that's to remind us of that one time a long time ago when God brought people through the Jordan River. Listen, God's not against remembering the good old days. God's very much for it, but you have to learn the right lessons from the past. And the lesson is when we need God, he is there. And when we follow God forward, he makes a way. That's the lesson. And that's the lesson that he taught to the nation of Israel. As Natasha comes back up to play, Joshua kept moving forward, and here was the result. Joshua 4, verse 14. That day, which day? The day when they crossed the Jordan River. That day, the Lord made Joshua a great leader in the eyes of all the Israelites, and for the rest of his life, listen to this. You remember what I said earlier about Moses? For the rest of his life, they revered him as much as they had revered Moses. Whoa. Okay? We're not sure exactly where the nation crossed over the Red Sea. Think about this. At its most narrow point today, if you were to cross the Red Sea today, the shortest that passage could be is like 7 to 8 miles at a depth of almost 1,000 feet deep. Imagine a wall of water 1,000 feet up. You ever go to downtown Chicago? Imagine that's just water, and you're just walking through. The Jordan River, at its most swollen, which it was in this moment, is maybe maybe a mile across, and at max about 100 feet deep. That seems much less impressive than parting the Red Sea. But there's something important that you need to learn. Whether you have a life and a shelf full of good old days, whether you're 15 and you're like, I don't think I've had any yet, there's something important that you need to know. The people of Joshua's time felt God, don't miss this, just as powerfully when he parted a river as the previous generation felt when he parted an ocean. It was just as powerful. It was no less meaningful. Every generation has new mountains to top. And if we, as those who have experienced God before, say, yeah, but it's not like it was in the 70s. Yeah, but I remember that time when I went to the revival in Pensacola, Florida, and I remember the guy, and they were just praying, and everyone's just falling over, and they were just like, and man, that's when the Spirit. Don't miss this. I've seen some powerful times with God, and if I said, if it doesn't happen like that, I'm still waiting for the God moment, then I could be in the middle of a God moment and not even realize it. And I could be actively preventing my children from having a God moment in their life because I'm like, well, that's not it. Keep waiting. When God shows up, here's what it's going to look like. But it might be different. Teenagers, I had some amazing students. I had some amazing moments at camp. I'm like, wow, this is great. You go to a different camp. I went to youth camp in Kentucky. I'm sure they have great camps. But if I said, no, we need to send our kids to Kentucky youth camp, that's where God is. As if God is not also in Illinois. As if God is not also in Sunday morning. Well, if they would sing the songs we did at camp, we would worship like that. God's the same God here. And he wants moments for you here. Kate, God did not just move in your dad's lifetime. He has moments for you. And they might be totally different for you. Nicole, God did not just do a miracle in your mom's life so that you could have faith. God wants you to experience him for yourself. And it might be totally different. And it might not be as dramatic as physically healing your body, but it's just as impactful. God is still in the business of saving. He is still in the business of empowering. The Holy Spirit is still as strong as he has ever been and still as active in our world. But that plan and that mission and that vision of God moves us forward. And if the lesson we learned from the past is those are good old days, and if I don't look like that, feel like that, they're not God anymore, we've missed it. And we've taken what should have been encouragement in our past and turned it into this bizarre kind of idealized idol that we could never reach. There were some great moments in this room, and I thank God for that. Some of you remember when we had to do multiple services in this room because you couldn't fit all of the people, and there weren't these sidewalls in here, and I celebrate that. There are people that are part of God's family today because of what was happening then. But if we say, oh man, until we have 900 people in this room, we do those concerts, God's not really moving. What? I don't want to miss what God's doing today. Because God has new experiences for every generation. And Betty, I believe that God has experiences still ahead for you. I don't think every God moment in your life is in your past. I believe that God has moments where you feel him just as strongly as you did before today. So don't fall in love with the past. Take what God has done in the past and use that to say, if he was consistent before, if he was good before, if he was strong before, and he's the God who never changes, and he's still the God who rewards those who seek him. He's still the God whose mission is moving forward. And if I move forward with him, I can encounter him in fresh new ways today. That's what I want. Hey, this is Pastor Chris again. Thanks for listening. If today's talk was helpful in your spiritual life, odds are there's someone you know who could benefit from it. Take a minute right now to share it with them. And if you live in the area, come try out a service in person, because church is more fun with friends. See you next time.